everyone. Thank you for having me to talk about my thesis project. I'm Jackie. I graduated from my master's this year from the University of Nottingham, and I'm now working for a firm in London. So my project is Design for Life, and it's based in a small town called Reigate in Surrey. So it's based in an area of the southeast with a rising aging population. So the design of this space aims to create a more inclusive care home setting which focuses on health and well-being. So my own living situation was the inspiration for this project. My grandparents have lived with me since I was 7, and neither of them ever wanted to go into a care home. And as my granddad got older, we had to get at-home care to help him out. So when I was at home in the holidays, I'd get chatting with her, and I asked her, I was like, Faith, why do you do like at-home care? Why don't more people go into care homes? And she said, it just makes them worse. People don't get better because they're just not built for that. And that got me asking some questions. I thought, how can architecture help with this situation? So I started off with some research projects. I was looking at Prospect and Refuge, and used this art precedent which incorporates the hearth as a place of safety and familiarity, and then also shows the windows so people can see activity and want to get involved. I also looked at this theory of salutogenesis, which looks at manageability, comprehensibility, and meaningfulness, and it is primarily a psychological theory. However, I wondered how this could be incorporated architecturally to help places be more familiar and better understood by people that experience them, as the built environment influences our everyday life. So 3 of the precedents I looked at was the Royal Hospital in Chelsea, the Amphora Care Home, and the Alzheimer's Respite Centre. And when trying to apply them to this theory, I found they kind of fell into this Venn diagram, and each kind of encompassed 2 of these key theories, but none of them really fell in the centre. So that's where my thesis project that's what it was aiming for. So this was the conclusion piece I did, which was a model, which was trying to encompass all of the successful aspects from my thesis research, and then was the stepping stone into my final thesis project. So as I said, it's based in the southeast. I was looking at the MHA residential care home distribution, and there is a gap in the southeast, so they would be the client for this project. So I'll go over site analysis quite quickly. I was looking at the suburban grain, looking at threshold conditions and how edges are formed, quite often with walls and fences, looking at the streets and landmark views. And then this is where the site is. So it falls kind of on a crossroads between landscape, commercial high street area, and also residential area. So it's right in the centre of this existing community. And then just looking a bit more closely at the site and the existing adjacent building. So the existing adjacent building is Reigate Priory, and it is a Grade 1 listed building, which was a primary school. However, the primary school's now moved, and it's kind of falling into ruin. It doesn't really have much of a purpose. So the idea of this scheme was to bring a significance back to this heart that is in the centre of the area. So that's just the existing site model. Design strategies, I was looking at translation of the vernacular, polite versus vernacular, and Kevin Lynch wayfinding principles. It's also in the green belt and on the edge of a conservation site. Some of the key features of that are tiled walls, red brick, and also maintaining long vistas. So I did a quick collage picking out common themes of the residential buildings, so looking at porches, chimneys, and personalised entrances. And then looking back at Reigate Priory, trying to explore how the front is quite formal and quite regular. However, the back is a lot more eclectic, and it feels a lot more homely, and it's a lot more random and push and pulled. So I used that to try and inform the facades of the private and social spaces. So the communal entrance spaces have that more regular rhythm, whereas the domestic areas have a bit more of a random facade. So that is the south elevation looking from the park space towards Reigate Priory and the care home design. So again, this is just looking at how the private and the social spaces kind of sit together, so they're not pulled apart, and the people can feel like part of their own community and then also part of a wider community. Again, that's just an ISO looking at how the proposal sits in relation to the park space to the south and to Reigate Priory as well. And then that's just the proposed. So in terms of Kevin Lynch wayfinding principles, the site is really well connected. It's got its own landmarks, and basically I figured out it was quite successful, so then wanted to incorporate these into the scheme and the landscape design as well. It's a site plan. So on the site, it includes social dining and activity areas. I wanted to consider the staff areas as well, make them feel like they're important to the scheme as well as the residents. And then created evening social spaces and dining spaces as well. Then there's the 3 clusters with a total of 6 clusters, which forms the residential spaces. So looking at the wayfinding principles, the nodes fall over courtyard spaces, and in terms of paths, there are no dead ends or places where people can get stuck and confused. Like there's quite maintaining a fluidity and permeability to the site. And then also using edges to define communal and public private spaces as well, so using strong edges or like stepped edges to define the differences. And then also looking at the districts and also how all of the views end with like a landmark feature or a long vista. So sustainability was also a key point as well, health being the focus of the design. So I was looking at the health of the environment, the building, and of the residents. Just a quick bit of background on the geology and planting, TPOs. So this is a landscape plan. I was looking at material changes as well to define the thresholds and define the more public spaces compared to private spaces. Incorporate some greenery, and then also make sure there was planting and sustainable drainage systems around on the site as well. I was looking at a 50-kilometre radius of the site as well for materials and looking at material localism. I found that most things could be sourced within the UK within like a few exceptions. And this was a quick collage I did early on in the project to explore how materials can interact with each other and create this quite dramatic roofscape. And then I took tiles from the existing high street and also from Reigate Priory as well, and then tried to play with the forms to create a new tile shape which could add like a little quirkiness to the design and just another little element of interest which relates to the context. Also, again, looking at how facade conditions can help define these public and private spaces so they can sit adjacent to each other yet still remain separate. And that leads me to the 1 to 20, so I won't zoom in. But primarily it's a timber frame structure with sheep's wool insulation within the beams, and then there's a hempcrete layer on the outside of that as well to build up the thickness for window seats and add another layer of insulation and airtightness to the design. I was looking at the sort of people that would use the proposals, so I wanted it to be a lot more inclusive than care homes are at the moment. So I was looking at the needs of potentially elderly couples that would move in together. Maybe it's a single person who has family close or a single person who has family far away. So the design includes shared short stay overnight rooms for visiting family members as well, and then also considering the needs of the staff and the different people that would be working there, so their needs are considered as much as the residents. I was looking at the existing community, so it's already a very strong existing community, so the design wants to enhance that and be a part of that as well, and I think its location is perfectly suited for it. And so in order to provide these connections and opportunity, I was looking at Reigate Priory as the main gateway for this, and then was looking at a series of courtyards which connect to this. So, and then the courtyards also reflect a person's 24-hour journey across the site. So there's just some quick visuals representing like the 3 main courtyards, so morning activities, lunchtime and night. And then cut through the social spaces. So the social space is the main connection between the private courtyards and to the wider park to the south of the site as well. So looking at shared activities, so this is the gardening area which can be overlooked by passers-by in the park, so they become part of the community and like people can see what they're up to. Just a quick collage looking at inside the rooms, and I did structural model looking at the timber frame and like the brick bookends and how the timber frame sits within it for a typical construction, and then a quick visual on the inside of what a typical room would look like. I looked at 3 standard room types, which can be all wheelchair adaptable, with, so you can put a hoist in between the beds and the bathrooms. So there's no more than 6 people sharing one lounge, and this is what I'm calling a cluster. And in terms of access, no private space is directly accessible from a communal space. So they all have their shared lounge, and they all have a private garden, and then there's this transition from your private space to a public space. That's going back to the research. Again, looking at this transition from private space to shared space to public space. And this is it, responding to my initial question with the Venn diagram. So the proposal establishes a home from home for elderly who arrive from a range of different backgrounds with a variety of needs, providing spaces which feel safe, that they can personalise and create refuge rather than simply dwelling in an institutional setting. So the proposal aims to enhance the character of Reigate Priory without competing with it, and provide a personal connection to enrich the existing community while giving a presence to a demographic which is often forgotten. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we made it just in time, I think. But we do have a few minutes for comments and questions from the panel. If you have any. Aisha.
I think, thank you for the presentation. There are a few aspects that I enjoyed thoroughly. The first being how you look at your design from the macro and micro perspective simultaneously, and you constantly zoom in and zoom out from urban landscape to navigating between blocks within the building, all the way to the material details. So that was brilliant. And the other aspect I really enjoyed was the sense of dynamism in the design, where you don't, and it shows in your presentation that you don't perceive spaces as static. So you show that variety of instances within instances or events that would that your architecture will enable. So that was really really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I loved its easy informality and the fact that you kind of riffed on vernacular architecture, and I thought that was done really successfully. And as someone of my age, I think I'm the target audience, really. It's definitely somewhere I'd like to live, so congratulations on that. You know, I do find myself at weekends driving past care homes and wondering, well, that's where I'll end up. But I'd definitely like to end up here, yeah.
Thank you.
One question from the audience.
Hey, so again, from the care work, it almost kind of becomes a kind of a professional friend, which means that managing boundaries with the clients can also be really, really difficult. So I was wondering how you organize the space so that the carers who lived in this complex could navigate those boundaries. Like, are they separated off? Are they within the same buildings? Like, how have you managed that?
So do you mean like the residents and how they don't like mingle with outsiders?
Yeah, like whether the carers and the residents are in the same buildings or not, or whether there's distinct boundaries.
So the residential clusters, they kind of have tweaks between them. So some of them have assisted bathrooms and some of them have small kitchenettes. So it kind of accommodates a range of needs. And then the staff areas and communal areas are then separated from that. So each residential bit they have their own private entrance, which they can like customize and make their own and make it feel like a home that they want to be in. But then like the care staff are separate, and I suppose like I guess it's like a technical point that they would have like appointments and they'd go check on someone if they need checking, and some people might be okay getting themselves up in the morning so they know that they can be left and stuff like that. But I mean, from this visual, it's trying to show how you can have the communal spaces in quite close proximity to the private spaces, but the way the facades are like pulled out and you have these like little openings, it kind of separates them out from this like public-private space, so they can be adjacent yet not intruding on each other, if that makes sense, if that answers your question.
Okay, thank you very much.